my name is Felicitas Hillmann. I'm head of the networking unit Paradigm Shift at Technical University Berlin, and we are responsible for a series of webinars we do as part of the pre-conference process for the Metropolis conference taking place in Berlin later this year in September. And yeah, I'm very pleased that we have today a topic on our list which we think is very important, which is about remote work and return migration. Can ICTs motivate return migration? And of course, I do hope to welcome many of you to our real conference in September. But here we start talking about issues we think we should be thinking of much more. So what you see here is what we see, and what we sense is that our world of analog work is fading away. So the conditions of remote work have become the new normal for many people, many workers. So you can see here the person sitting there on the sofa and everything fine there, but not in the office. This is the message here. So is remote work about individual lifestyle, a modus of work? Is it more than a cope with COVID-19 strategy? That's the question we might ask. It's not the question we are focusing on, but that is normally what you hear from people, that many people want to work from home and that this form of work has increased since 2005. Especially so in the US. So we have nearly 70% of the millennials that would like to work from home or in more flexible working space. We have people that say they would like to work from home or to work from other locations, such as Zagreb or whatsoever. But we also have people that think that they would be unplugged from their work environment. So there are some downsides. But this is not the focus today. Our focus will be slightly different. If you look on what remote work means, what it could offer to countries, you come to another thrive how to discuss this topic. So I just checked what are the regions in Europe, and those are NUTS regions that see a decrease or an increase in the population. And you know that the consequences of a shrinking population are a shrinking workforce, and that it normally means more urbanization, rural divide. So if we, excuse me, what does it mean for? One moment. Oh, doesn't work here. Yeah, excuse me. So this is where we are. So if you look on the NUTS level, we see that 2/3 of, so meaning 802 regions are projected until 2050 to have a shrinking population. So 2/3 of Europe is shrinking, and we have 1/3, 414 regions that are predicted to have a higher population than before. So what are the consequences of this shrinking? We have a shrinking workforce, and we have that urbanization with a with a cleavage between the urban regions and the rural regions. And I want to show you here that especially Latvia, Slovenia, and Croatia are top on the list of countries where we see such shrinking. And this is why we organized this workshop, in this webinar, to think outside the box on migration. What could migration mean for us in terms of remote work? Could we try to have people back to certain countries which have seen emigration? Will migration be a solution to a shrinking population? This is a topic today, and I'm very happy to present you the speakers, which are Agnese Lace. She's working with Providus at the Center for Public Policies, where she has done research on international protection, for example. And she was working at the University of Latvia, working on a sustainable and cohesive society. She was working with UNHCR in Latvia, was doing monitoring, and she's a PhD candidate at Koch University and the University of Amsterdam. So I'm pleased to have her among the speakers, and you've seen that Latvia is among the countries where we see a very stark population decline, so meaning also workforce decline. Our next speaker is Dejan Valentinčič. He's State Secretary at the State Secretary for Slovenian Abroad and Research Institute of American Slovenian Education. Excuse me, I have to do things parallelly here. And he's head of the Center for Social Science Research there. And he has been he is State Secretary of the Republic of Slovenia. Our next presenter is Dr. Caroline Hornstein-Tomic at the Ivo Pilar Institute of Social Science in Zagreb. And also she is an expert on post-socialist transformation processes and has worked extensively in civic and public sectors. She's been in Germany with the Federal Agency for Civic Education also, and has worked with Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. So I'm pleased to have such three fantastic speakers. We have somebody commenting on this, and that is Howard Duncan. I'm pleased to see him here. He's some sort of gray eminence in the field of migration, especially so for the Metropolis network with which we work closely. And he's been involved into Metropolis since 1997. So welcome, Howard. And he's based at the moment at Carleton University at the Migration and Diaspora Studies Department. He's absolutely known for his approach, and that is what we do with Metropolis, to integrate researchers, practitioners, and policymakers, as well as civil society and the economy and enterprises. So we want to get a discussion started on remote work and return migration. And how do we do that? We will have each speaker will have 10 minutes to speak about his or her country. We then have Howard. He will be commenting for about 7 minutes. So I'm very pleased to have all those great speakers here and to have this very wise audience, and I hope we can get into discussion. I would give the floor to the first speaker, which is Agnese. Please go ahead. I stopped my presentation here. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. It is a pleasure being here. Let me start my screen, and I will talk about the government initiatives in Latvia to promote return, mainly in the past couple of years following the pandemic and the opportunities created by this time period. But to start, I will of course give you a short introduction on what Latvia looks like in general in terms of emigration and return migration, and what have been the initiatives beforehand to attract return migrants. You saw very well, Latvia tops the list regarding shrinking population. It has been so for a while, and it's not news. This is because of lower birth rates and a large-scale emigration following the 2008 and 9 financial crisis. Similarly to elsewhere in Eastern Europe, but I have to say that return rates in Latvia and Lithuania have been significantly lower than in other countries that also experienced a similar wave of emigration. And so they say that about 440,000 people could be considered Latvian diaspora. Diaspora in the case of Latvia also includes those people who are descendants of Second World War refugees. Some of them might be citizens, some not, but they might be still active and belonging to Latvian communities abroad. Canada has had one of the largest diaspora communities before this 2008 and 9 immigration wave. In Toronto hosted one of the largest Latvian communities outside of Latvia for the longest time. Now it's the UK and Ireland and also Scandinavian countries. They say that there are about 145,000 return migrants. This return has intensified in the last 5 years because of economic development, but also in the past 2 years, it might be linked with the pandemic, even though what we see from research and from comments from regional return migrant consultants is that for many, this decision actually takes a long time. And it's basically, if we do a little bit of calculation, there were a lot of people who left who were university age or just started working, and they worked there for a couple of years, they established family, and now it's time for their children to start school. So oftentimes this is one of the important drivers of return. And is being weighed for a couple of years before this move is actually done. And the permanence of such return migration is actually unpredictable. There are many return migrants who emigrate again. I was one of them. I went and came back and went and came back. Now I've been here for 6 years. Will I never leave again? I don't know. And that is similar for many. There also are various ways how to count this, but as I said, it's unpredictable. But whenever the pandemic started, and actually towards the end of the first year of the COVID era, there were loud headlines in international media saying that this pandemic is changing migration patterns, and many Eastern Europeans have actually gone home. But what we saw here in Latvia, it has more to do with the lack of labor opportunities abroad, because they worked in service sectors, hotels, restaurants that were closed. So they came here. Whether they will stay is unknown, because if job opportunities arise again, maybe they stay. But it is for sure that many did come back for the time period. You will see this, I'm sure you will receive this presentation, but basically I'm basing this talk on an article that talks about how various economic drivers for migration policy shape these policy initiatives, and I critique them in the sense that because of these economic drivers and unpredictability of them as well, some of these initiatives, policy initiatives, are very short-term and are not maybe fulfilled to their fullest potential. But contrary to the paper that was published already last year, now I have some good news, but I'll save it for a little bit. So here are the migration dynamics. We also see that there's not so much immigration, but the last data, comprehensive data, is for 2018, also 2019. There are estimates that actually 2021 is the first year when there's a negative or a positive migration balance for the first time since our regaining of independence, which is good news, but also it's because not as many people could leave. It's not only because many people returned or immigrated. And there are several kind of longer standing return migration policy initiatives. The first one is the Return Migration Support Plan, which focuses exactly on return migration. There were some initiatives on like links with diaspora, links with Latvian community abroad, but they didn't mention specifically return migration as their aim. So this one was the first one developed in 2011 and 12. And it was in force for 4 years, but unfortunately many of the very good ideas included in this plan were never fulfilled because they weren't awarded the funding necessary for this. The 2018 diaspora law includes a whole section on return migration policy, on return migration, but also does not include benchmarks or clear measures on what kind of return do we want to promote, how do we want it to look like, where do we want these people to become engaged here in Latvia, is there more focus on education, on employment, on just retirement as long as they return to Latvia. We lack this very clear focus and benchmarking to evaluate the success of these policy initiatives. And then finally, entering into force tomorrow are amendments to immigration law that introduce a new regulation on remote work and essentially a digital nomad visa. But a little bit more on that. So during the COVID times, during the pandemic, there were several ad hoc incentives, and one of them resulted in these immigration law amendments, which is great. But actually, the talk about this started with the Ahead of the Curve campaign. And if you'll Google this or click on this link in the presentation later, you can watch a video where they show beautiful landscapes of Latvia, and they say that, you know, we have, there is a long beach, and more than 40% of our land is covered by forests. We also have one of the fastest internets in the world. You are welcome to return to Latvia. It is the remote work dreamland. If you have to work from home, come work from home or come work to Latvia. But afterwards, when asking questions to the agency that implemented this campaign, whether this was at all aimed at return migration or promoting of immigration, each of the officials in this agency, Latvian Investment and Development Agency, they provided a different answer. Some never saw this as a promotion of return migration, which is a pity because it could have been, and if this was linked with other policy initiatives like diaspora, like those envisioned in the diaspora law, this probably could have been used to a better term. And these videos were never used whenever COVID numbers started going up, because in the beginning, Latvia was rather a safe haven, and then we turned the tide, and it was quite the opposite. Then we never used these videos. I already mentioned these regional consultants that actually some of them themselves say that the fact that there was more return in the past couple of years might be a coincidence, because many of these return moves have been in the works for years. There were some webinars also by State Employment Agency, what you should know if you want to work remotely or if you want to return to Latvia and work remotely from here, regarding legal aspects, tax aspects, and so on. So those were great, but again, not more informative and not as part of a strategic approach to actually promote return. And then finally, there was an NGO called With World Experience in Latvia. It's a return migrant NGO that said that this is the moment when regulation for remote work and digital nomadism could be introduced. In the paper I wrote, this was still just discussions in a working group. There was a conference last fall dedicated to this, with high-standing officials participating. And then in February this year, the Latvian government passed these amendments to immigration law that still had to go through Parliament, and were finally accepted in the beginning of June, and will enter into force tomorrow, and we will finally have a digital nomad visa or remote work visa. And I have to say that all of this is happenstance. It's all ad hoc, it's piecemeal, it's a short-term approach. And even if we use these windows of opportunity presented by economic growth or COVID, when people can work from anywhere in the world, we don't really think of it as a wider strategy. Listen, we've been thinking about promoting return migration. Let's all sit down with everyone involved and think of what we can do in this particular moment to really take up this opportunity and attract as many people as possible. And because there is no such approach, there's obviously also no benchmarking and evaluation, because it's like, hey, let's make a video. We made a video. Did it have to have an impact? I don't know. It was a pretty video. But if this video was made with a thought in mind, listen, let's see how many people look at this. Let's see how many people click on this link at the end of the video. Let's see how many people reach out to regional return migration consultants or this agency to find out more about this. Let's talk with these people who did that. There was no such approach. And unfortunately, we can't say whether any of this was successful. The fact that this digital nomad visa or remote work visa has finally been introduced, also great, but as it enters into force tomorrow, I can't say whether it's going to be successful or not. We can talk about it sometime in the future. But because of this type of approach, we really do not, in the end, take full advantage of these windows of opportunity presented by various times in global developments. So that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Agnese, for your excellent explanations on what you're doing and how to reach people, what is the way to come up with such visa. And we just continue in the order of our country ranking. So the next speaker is Dejan, who was second in the list for in terms of country. Thank you so much, Dejan. Please take the floor.
Okay, thank you, Felicitas. I'm very happy to be here today. So I will give a short presentation about the, just a second, so that I open the PowerPoint. So about the Slovenian case of modern immigration. This is an issue for Slovenia, but in the last couple of years, some initiatives were started to change this. Okay, I hope that now the PowerPoint is on, is it?
All good, it's on.
Okay, perfect. Mm-hmm. So I've been working on the theme of modern immigration and brain drain for some years now, but the last 4 years I've been also serving at the governmental office for Slovenians abroad. First 2 years as an advisor to the minister, and then the last 2 years as state secretary. I just finished my term because we got new government a couple of weeks ago. So I'm returning full-time to the academia, but the purpose of my presentation today is to show some research on this theme and also some practical measures, some policies that were taken. For the beginning, just a couple of words about Slovenia. So this is a country of 2 million people, but about 500,000 people lives in diaspora. So 1/5 of the nation. We have 3 historical immigration waves, but what is most important, most relevant for today, especially modern immigrants. And when talk about modern immigration, we talk about people who left since 1991, when Slovenia gained its independence. But we can say that besides 91, we have 2 other years that are very crucial. It's 2004, where Slovenia became member of the European Union, and 2011, when we entered the Schengen. So it became much easier to move within EU. So partly Schengen, partly the economic crisis, which started in 2008, but it became worse in Slovenia in 2012. It became that the immigration arose a lot. So from 1991 till 2012, there was no significant immigration for Slovenia. whereas between 2012 and 2018, between 8,000 and 10,000 people moved abroad every year. And if I tell you the other information, that we have about 20,000 newborns in Slovenia every year, so you could see that almost half of our born generation was moving out in these years. That's why this became a burning issue. And part of this is also why the government, the Slovenian Ministry of Education and Slovenian Research Agency, they launched a big national research project mitigating the consequences of brain drain and strengthening the mechanism of brain circulation, which started in 2019. It lasted 2 years. I was the head of this project. There were 8 researchers involved, and we can say that this was the biggest Slovenian research project till now on the issue of modern migration. And as a head of this project, I would like to present you some of the results today. Then in last year, we also had a research on the Marie Curie action plan. So this is these are scholarships for the fellows of EU. What are the results there? And third, not least, as I mentioned, I was state secretary for the last 2 years. So I would like to present some of the practical changes that happened in Slovenia in this period. But before I start, maybe just a couple of words about American Slovenian Education Foundation, ASEF, where I work as a researcher, because this is, I could say, the key initiative regarding the modern brain circulation and attracting people back home. So American Slovenian Education Foundation was started in 2014 in California by 2 Slovenians who became professors in Stanford and Santa Clara universities. But till today, it has more than 50 professors of Slovenian origin who today work at the best universities around the world, from Oxford in Great Britain to Harvard, Stanford, Princeton in the United States, to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, etc. So they are all willing to accept the best students, 1 student per year, for free for 10 weeks to spend in their research groups to see how research is done at the best universities in the world and to bring this knowledge back to Slovenia. This is a program that was started in 2014. A couple of years later, we also started another project, which is inviting young people of Slovenian origin who were born in diaspora to come to Slovenia to work for 10 weeks to get ties with Slovenia. So you may know that many countries have some programs usually called heritage trips. So this is for young people from diaspora to came to the home country of their parents, great-parents, great-great-parents, and meet the culture, the history, etc. So our program is similar, with this difference that these people work in Slovenia for 10 weeks. So they can still go to the language course, they travel out of Slovenia, but very important is that they work so that they also have professional ties, because we believe that if they will have these ties also in the future, so some professional opportunities, it's more likely that they will stay connected to Slovenia. So this is NGO part of the ASEF programs, which are mostly funded by donations, mostly American Slovenians. Something is also financed by the Slovenian government. Other part of the ASEF is also Center for Social Science Research, where we research that kind of trends, and that's also part of my story, to say so. So now, coming to the first project. So we combined 3 methodologies to start this. Questionnaires, about 2,500 people responded this, and this was open for everyone who moved from Slovenia from 2004 on. So since Slovenia entered EU on, regardless where they live and what's their education, what's their type of work. Then qualitative part of the research was 20 semi-structured interviews, but those interviews were concentrated only on highly educated people who are scientists, entrepreneurs, or something like this. And then the third part is that we did an analysis of policies of other countries in Europe, starting with almost all countries, but then choosing 8 countries which have the base policies. What did they do in the past? What were the results? And what could Slovenia learn from it? So here you will see some graphs about the questionnaires, and at the same time I will explain some resumes about the interviews. So when asking people who moved abroad if they're interested, if they're willing to return in Slovenia in the future, 2/3 of population said that yes, or they are willing to return, or they're even thinking of return. Maybe they already returned to Slovenia. Only 1/3 said that they are certain that they will stay abroad in the future. But even among those, I don't have this graph. So among those 1/3 who is not willing to come to Slovenia, more than 60% want to cooperate with Slovenia on a professional basis. So now our issue was how to attract these people back home. What were the main reasons why they left, and what should have changed in Slovenia so that they would come back? So the results were quite interesting because, of course, the main reason was economic reasons. But the interesting fact here was that people who were highly educated were much less complaining about the taxation than those who were workers, physical workers, and they moved most usually to Austria or to Germany still to work in fabrics, which is very interesting because Slovenia is known to be one of the most egalitarian countries in the world, and we also have very explicit progressive taxation. So people who work as physical workers, they pay 16% tax, whereas those who make more than 74,000 euro per year, they pay 50% of tax. But those weren't complaining. Those who of course don't earn that much, but they complain about high taxes. So we can see that, of course, it's not always just about some facts or some reason. It's also, of course, about feelings, how people feel in a country. And many people, more especially those who are not highly educated, were very negative about the social climate in Slovenia. Whereas those who are highly educated, they said that the main reason for them leaving Slovenia were better working conditions abroad. Salary, but also, like for scientists, the scientific infrastructure, what the labs could offer them, etc. What about returning home? So those who return or who are certain that they will return, they didn't say that they will return for some professional reasons or some economic reasons, but mostly to reconnect with their family, with their friends, because of the nature, the quality of life. But when talking about the social and the economic issues, the reason that was chosen very often were also quality of life, in a sense, the balance between work and free time, free education, good health system, and also free kindergartens. So that were things that motivated people besides their family issues. So as I said, among those who are not planning to come back, more than half of them is willing to stay connected to Slovenia. And this, of course, is still important for our country, for every country, because, of course, not everyone will return, but it is important to have people abroad who, still feel connection to Slovenia. So when we're preparing the policies, on one hand, we're preparing ideas how to attract more people back, but of course, on the other hand, also how to promote and intensify the collaboration with those who will stay abroad. So this is a very short resume of this research. Of course, I know that I'm very limited to time, so I can explain a little bit later. Just maybe to say that those two ASEF programs that I mentioned at the beginning, you know, many people in Slovenia were also critical about those two programs, especially the first one. So professors working at universities abroad, inviting young professionals to stay with them for 10 weeks, because they said that this is a promotion of immigration. That these people will see how nice it is in the foreign countries, and they wouldn't like to return back. But when we did, as part of this research and inner research about where do those fellows live, it shows that it's not such a thing, because about 85% of them lives in Slovenia today. Only 15% abroad, but almost everyone who lives abroad went abroad to continue their studies. So, of course, on one hand, we can say that these programs don't promote the immigration, but at the same time, also, of course, it's a bit idealistic to think that if you go to Harvard University for 10 weeks, they will try to have you for a professor there. So it's not so easy. And the other research, so the fellows who came to Slovenia from diaspora, as I mentioned at the beginning, so it was very intentionally that it's not just cultural history, but also work. And we can see here that when we ask them what was the main reason for them to apply for this ASEF fellowship, about 65% answered a professional opportunity, less than 10% to get to know homeland of my ancestors. We did it on purpose. We didn't offer the solution both, because in that case, of course, most of them would say both, but we didn't want that. We wanted to see what was the most important reasons, but we can still see that about 25% said other, and of course, those who said other wrote on the comment that both. So what was the point here? That of course, these people still, they feel Slovenian identity, because otherwise they wouldn't choose to come to Slovenia, but still, you know, not just a culture, also work is of significant importance. So the other research was done last year during the Slovenian presidency to the EU. It was financed by the European Commission. And the question was, what happens to the Maria Skadlowska-Curie fellows after they finish their programs? So we know that those programs offer students or professionals from European countries to go to other universities. It's very competitive, but of course, those who are successful, then they can enter the universities they want. So what happens to them? Do they come back after the end of this fellowship or not? So we didn't get many answers, because we only had 1 month time to do this research, because the presentation had to be done before the end of the presidency. But still, what we got are some of the interesting results. So more than half, 54%, did go back to the countries from the foreign fellows. Almost half of them stayed abroad or came back and went abroad, but still some of them are thinking of returning eventually. This is the situation with those who are on fellowship now. So 1/4 is thinking about staying abroad, 28% is certain to go back, and others, you know, are somewhere in between. So, and now to conclude, so of course, these were some research findings, but in the last 2 years, I had the opportunity also to put some of the findings in practice. It wasn't perfect, because if I would start my role as state secretary after the research project, it would be easier. Now it was at the same time, but still we did some things. So what happened in Slovenia in the last 2 years, and it already brought some results. We hope that further results in returning migration will increase in the following years. So we introduced a welcome office within the governmental office for Slovenians abroad, which gives information and advice for those who would like to return. This is, of course, people doing this, but at the same time, we also established a modern web page which contains all relevant information and also motivation stories of those who did return or would like to return. But of course, our governmental office is a small office. Head is minister without portfolio. So we knew that this is not enough. So we established that each ministry in Slovenia now has a contact person that can give relevant answers from their field of work. Another thing that was in our focus in the last 2 years was that in the past, of course, everything regarding diaspora was kind of understood in the frame of the governmental office. But this is a very small office and it doesn't have enough power. So now what we did is that all relevant strategies, laws, etc., which were open in this period, they also included diaspora policies. Just to give one example, so Slovenia has a research council, which is 6 people body that gives advice how to run the scientific policies. From now on, one of the researchers always has to be a member of diaspora. And let me mention also 2 concrete schemes for Slovenian scientists. Of course, if I may just 30 seconds and stop. So 2 schemes for scientists abroad. The first one is Aleš Debljak scheme. So now every year 12 fellowships must be given by people who wish to return to Slovenia. But the other one is even more important. So we all know what RC grants are, the most prestigious and the most worth grants in the EU. So if one person applies, he has to have about 90 points out of 100 to be chosen. But all those applications that have 80 or more points are very quality, are good. So now everyone who gets 80 points or more is founded by Slovenia Inc., but not abroad. He has to do the research in Slovenia. And all those who did the research abroad, if they are willing to return to Slovenia, the Slovenia with national funds, they prolong for 1 additional year. So here are some more policies, but I don't have time to present them. So I will give you the opportunity to read them, and maybe then if someone would like to ask.
We will put this online. Thank you so much. And sorry to interrupt you here. Okay. Thank you. We are running out of time, so I have to chair this also. Thank you so much, Dejan. I just hand over to Carolina Hornstein-Tomic. Please share your slides. Dejan, could you please remove? Excellent. We cannot hear you.
Yeah, here I am. Are you seeing my slides?
Yeah.
Okay, then I change into full screen and jump immediately into some contextual information. Croatia is considered a classic country of emigration with a long history of emigration reaching throughout the whole 20th century. Since the early 1990s, there were again high levels of emigration after the transition, like in most states in Central, Eastern and Southeastern Europe. Between 2000 and 2012, it was annually approximately 10,000 people that left the country, and the financial crisis, like in Latvia, what Agnese said, also spurred emigration. Between 2008 and 13, we had a negative net migration of approximately 1.5 thousand. After EU accession, there was a new wave of emigration. And between 2014 and 19, 3 times more than before, which meant 33,000 people approximately left annually, and the net migration was an average minus 16.3 thousand. In 2007, Croatia even saw a peak of 47,000 emigrants, and the net migration was at minus 32,000. Since 2017-18, though, emigration is declining and return and immigration is raising. So the balance is slowly shifting. And since 2019, we even see a slowing of international mobility, both on the emigration and the immigration side, as can be seen in this graph, which goes until 2020. This is happening, this development of the demographic decline and the shrinking population that Felicitas, you also spoke in your introduction about. The birth rates in Croatia are declining since the 1950s, and population shrinking, of course, is constantly fueled by emigration. The social welfare systems are struggling through both developments and like in other countries who are aging societies faced with high immigration rates, especially of young and high skilled. So between, to sum up, 1991 and 2021, we had a population decline from 4.5 million to 3.9 million today. The demographic projections which you refer to by the UN says that Croatia is amongst the countries worldwide with the highest emigration rates, and which is at the same time also suffering most from population shrinking, with in 2050 expected further population decline to minus 18. The young and high-skilled mobility is what has been predominant in the discussion in recent years, since the age group of 15 to 44-year-olds is with approximately 55% overrepresented amongst the registered immigrants. The public discourse in Croatia is very critical about the immigration of this population, the young population, and the focus is often on measures how to prevent emigration. Migration and mobility is in discourse often not seen as beneficial, but rather as detrimental to development. And that is sort of the general frame of public debate. However, there's a need to change perspective on migration and mobility, and voices are strong nowadays also who are promoting this, who say we need reattracting measures to support return. We need programs fostering brain circulation and internationalization, like in Slovenia, and we need immigration policies that address the labor demand. I've been researching return and remigration for the past 10 years in different projects, from which I bring different knowledge together here in this short presentation. The methodology of these projects was qualitative research and expert interviews, also media discourse analysis and some focus groups. I will not go into details here. Let me just give you a brief idea. If we talk about return, who are we actually talking about? In order to get that clear, we need to understand that Croatia saw different immigration waves and has different immigrant communities. First of all, from the overseas immigration, which took place before World War II. Then after World War II, those overseas immigrants were joined by relatives or friends. The post-World War II political immigration is a phenomenon of its own, with communist dissidents and also former Nazi allies escaping or leaving the country. And from this community, we have seen after 1990, returning first generation with families. From the overseas immigration, the offspring, so often the third and fourth generation of the overseas immigrants, and many of them don't have Croatian passports or a citizenship. And we have the labor migration of the 60s and 70s. There, after 1990, was returning first and second generation. And we need to also keep in mind that there are very varying definitions of who actually constitutes the Croatian diaspora and whether it is indeed equaling the home population of nowadays 3.9 million. There are different stages of return after 1990. I focus on this period. In the 90s, numbers estimates are between 5,000 and 45,000. Many people didn't stay or didn't register or deregister. We have the return stay period between the millennium until the EU accession of Croatia in 2013, and then the return phase following EU accession since 2014. Also, we need to keep in mind that return and remigration has originally been mixed mostly with regional and co-ethnic immigration. And since 2018, we clearly see an increasing return and also slow immigration from inner EU mobility, then increasing remigration again from the overseas diaspora. This is a different topic, why this is the case, and immigration from third country nationals. I now will look a bit more into the COVID-19 related return, remigration, and remote work. The policy responses or measures fostering mobility and internationalization really have taken speed in the past 3-4 years to both targeting to re-attract immigrants, but also, for example, high-skilled immigrants. We had a change of the Aliens Act in January 2021 to facilitate immigration. We have a digital nomad visa, which was laid out after the first lockdown to enhance all year-round tourism, actually, since Croatia is living largely of tourism, and to attract high-skilled consumers. This is in action since 2020. We see a flexibilized quotas for employing foreign seasonal workers to tackle labor shortage since 2021. And we have the assisting of returnees via the Welcome Office, something similar to what Dejan has also pointed out for Slovenia, in the Central State Office for Croats Abroad. And the office is currently working on a new diaspora strategy, which is, and it's not clear yet whether this strategy also encompasses or addresses the needs of those that have been engaging in international mobility, especially after EU accession. These are all public sector responses, but we also have responses by academia and in the academic sector. For example, during Croatia's EU presidency, there was the so-called Zagreb Call for Brain Circulation. There are a whole range of programs which I will not now go into. And the private sector, for example, the Croatian Telecom definitely targets digital nomads, as this quote of Nikolina Pejovic, HR person in Croatian Telecom, is clearly saying. They see this group as a group they want to cater for their needs, respond to their interests, remove hurdles to remote work. They recognize the tech-savvy, dominantly high-skilled, knowledgeable people that she's talking about as a resource. They recognize their competencies and as carriers of so-called social remittances. This term is from Peggy Levitt, leaned from her, and the debate has been loomed large, particularly in Central Eastern European countries. Another company I'd like to point out is Rimac Automobili, for not only fans of the automotive industry. It's well-known startup which has now grown from a small into more than 1,000 employees. And Rimac has these videos, I can't play this now, but in which he is actually presenting his workforce and also showing showcasing that he employs and recruits people internationally. They say we are actually an international company. We are just located in Croatia. Our minds are out there. So this is a newcomer or a forerunner of internationalization of the Croatian industry. Internationalization strategies in the academic sectors target mainly legal provisions and frameworks. They are financing international mobility, and many are based on intergovernmental agreements. Let me briefly speak about the COVID-19 related return mobility and remote work. I have to bring here many who came in this period actually came on the digital nomad visa, which allows you to stay for 1 year in Croatia. And amongst those who use that visa are quite a number of returnees from the Croatian diaspora, so which do not have the citizenship, which did not return from EU mobility in order to, or did not need the visa as returnees from inner EU mobility, but rather from overseas mobility. The motives, the green ones, which are in the circles here, actually are shared between returnees and non-Croatian nationalities, like to explore Croatian culture, the country, the language, and the identity, of course, for those that have homeland ties. Then the context of the COVID situation and the lockdown measures, the lower living costs in Croatia, family reunion for those who have family in Croatia. Many in interviews mentioned that they were escaping from an unattainable socio-political environment in their countries of residence, like in the United States during the Trump administration. And lifestyle considerations, of course, are very clearly high up on the list. Then to pursue careers remotely seems to be not a difficult thing to do. Those in the blue bullets here up in especially those who have actually intentions to stay, and these are mostly those with Croatian roots or family ties. They do see themselves as change makers, people that bring in diversity, that foster internationalization. They want to support peers with initiatives they're developing in the country. They want to give back. That's a sort of often mentioned motive for those who were engaging in international mobility. They want to share knowledge, experience, and approaches, and to contribute to and advance development and progress in their country of origin. The digital nomads, is this a hype or a hope? So far, 500 have applied for the digital nomad visa. All are third country nationals who wish to stay for more than 3 months in the country. Croatia welcomes some 3,000 nomads per month on average, who tend to stay on tourist visas, which are of course 90 days max, and the average stay is 69 days. At any given moment, this means that Croatia is hosting approximately 6,000 nomads. The estimate spending of digital nomads is 100 million per year, and 50% go indeed to Split, and others go to other urban centers in the country. What is crucial, I believe, about the digital nomads is that they are spurring and creating a demand which is responded to by an industry that caters to the needs of digital nomads by providing accommodation, co-working, legal consulting, in-country tourism, mobility, etc. Except for IT, remote workers tend not to work in sectors with highest demand in local industry for skilled and high-skilled labor in tourism, health, or construction in Croatia, but they indeed work for remotely, so their employers are not in Croatia. This has also led to a discussion about taxation, which is a special case indeed. Maybe for our discussion on comparing the other countries, we can also devote some attention, which I see crucial for people to actually stay, be it returnees or digital nomads, which find Croatia potential country in which they would like to reside, a lack of openness, closed social circles and local networks. These are issues that, however, need more debates. There are soft factors, hard factors, system inertia, which is really putting a strain on immigrants and returning integration. And there is constant need for more programs and policies to facilitate diaspora outreach and return. And here I'd like to close and hand over.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Carolina. And I think this is a good starting point for Howard's comments. So system inertia, soft factors, needed measures, political initiatives. So Howard, please take the floor.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much.
I don't know how much time I should take.
5 to 7 minutes. We just go a bit over the time.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting this event, and thanks to the three speakers whose comments I found absolutely fascinating, and I was very happy to hear what has been going on in these three countries over the last few years. I think the main points that I would like to make, just as a discussant, have to do with the broad context within which we're now talking about return migration to these three countries. But of course, as we saw in the graphs, there are many, many countries that are suffering from population decline. And I think that in the cases of Latvia, Slovenia, and Croatia, there are lessons for all of these countries to take into account when they think about any attempts they might make to encourage people to come back to their countries. So the general context that I think needs to be borne in mind is that of the global competition for talent, which is something that's been noticed. It's been going on for a very long time, but it's been particularly noticed over the last 25 years. And this context of the global competition for talent continues to frame the situations in depopulating countries, such as those in Eastern Europe. And one thing that I was very impressed by from Agnese, Dejan, and Caroline was the fact that these countries were, more than many, explicitly noting that they have to compete for their own people to come back. It's not just a matter of nostalgia that is going to convince people to return. It's going to take a great deal more than feelings of nostalgia. It's going to, because people leave for reasons. And as many pointed out, the reasons tend to be economic. So if return is going to be motivated, it's going to have to be motivated by strong reasons. So it seems to me that countries that are going to be successful in dealing with their depopulation problems are going to be those countries that do recognize that they need to compete to have their people return. Compete not only with the societies to which they went, but third countries that they might choose to go to. Because if we talk about digital nomads, as most of our speakers did, you can be a digital nomad anywhere, not only your homeland. And so once again, countries like Croatia and Latvia and Slovenia are going to be competing with any country that happens to have decent internet capacity. So what is it that's going to make it possible for these countries to succeed? And I do know the degrees of success that we have seen already. But as Agnese pointed out, it's not you can't take it for granted that people who do return will stay. Mobility has never been easier than it is now. Obviously during COVID, mobility was greatly reduced, and we did see that in some of the statistics, but generally speaking, mobility has never been higher, and I think we will eventually return to normal. So again, return migration could be followed by remigration once again. So countries that want their people to come home are not only going to have to convince them to return, but to stay. So just a couple of general points here. It seems to me, hints, in fact, strong from some of our speakers. What homelands need to do is to offer something that you could just call it a return package. And so the question is, what would this return package include? Now, the one thing that, of course, is necessary is that members of the diaspora are aware of the return package. So governments or other institutions of society are going to need to be in direct communication with members of the diaspora to let them know what would be the advantages of returning, what is on offer from the homeland. And we've seen all three speakers refer to the basic economic considerations. But of course, when people leave, they tend to leave for economic reasons. So the question is, how can in Germany, in France, in Switzerland, and elsewhere in the world? And we did see some of the answers to this in the form of a lower standard of, a lower cost of living, not standard, a lower cost of living, and in fact a higher quality of life because of environmental considerations, perhaps, as well. I recall Agnese talking about the ways that Latvia is described with its myriad forests and so on. But the advantages of living in smaller communities where you might feel more attached to the community, the advantages of living in a place where you feel you might be able to make a difference. But the question that I think is often ignored is the question of reintegration. Now, those of us in the immigration field know all about integrating immigrants, but if people are returning home, it's a mistake to think that home is the same as it was when they left. In fact, returning home might feel like moving to a third foreign country. And we have heard, and I have heard this in many occasions in Eastern Europe, about a lack of welcome on the part of those who did not leave towards those who want to return. And so the challenges of reintegration are very important in this return package that needs to be offered, it seems to me. And this has to do not only with economic considerations such as employment, or if you're an entrepreneur, maneuvering around various regulations having to do with setting up a business and so on, but it has to do with social aspects of return, where the general population needs to be welcoming to those who decide they want to come back. So I'm very aware of the time, so I'll wrap things up quickly. The COVID opportunity, as you might call it, of working from anywhere. It was interesting to see the references to digital nomad programs or digital nomad visas. But as Carolyn pointed out, at least in the case of Croatia, the visa tends to be for relatively short stays, as opposed to permanency. But the question that of course arises is whether or not returning members of the diaspora, who let's say do not need a visa but have remained citizens, would be able to find a way to return and maintain their jobs in their destination society, for example, Germany or Austria, permanently. And this is something where we simply don't know what the future is going to offer. Will people who with permanent jobs in, for example, Germany, be able to return to Croatia, Slovenia, or Latvia and keep those jobs indefinitely? Well, we simply don't know if the employers in the destination country are going to be willing to do this, because we simply don't know the extent to which working from home or working from anywhere as a practice is going to continue. But let me just close by saying that I was extremely happy to hear the measures that these three countries are taking. I think that they are clearly leaders in this, but as all three of them mentioned, there remain limitations to the programs and policies that have been developed. Agnese made it very clear when she described the efforts in Latvia as being ad hoc and piecemeal, but it is, in fact, I think, a very positive move. What Latvia, Slovenia, and Croatia have done so far. It may not, and clearly is not, all that's required. It clearly is not the end of the story, but let's hope that this has set up some momentum to continue along these lines, because without continuing along these lines, the populations of these countries and many other countries, as we saw in the charts, will continue to fall. And this is not good news for any of these countries. So, Felicitas, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Howard, for your comment. We have now a lively debate going on in the chat, and I think Agnese has had some questions about the length of the visa and which other countries would do that. I will stop the recording and please continue, Agnese. Could you answer the questions, please?